My parents ditched my event for my brother's football game, only to find out later it was my wedding. After the pictures blew up online, Dad threatened divorce. Mom's in meltdown mode. Brother's raging. Now the entire family's falling. Everything started falling apart, piece by piece. Hey Reddit. I invited my parents to something important. They chose my brother's football game instead. I didn't tell them it was my wedding. The photos went online, and now my family is in chaos. Here's how it all happened. I'm Sam, 28, married now, with a good job and a decent life. But if you ask my mom, she only has one kid worth talking about, and it's not me. My younger brother Mike, 22, was born, and suddenly the entire household revolved around him. My mom, now 52, turned into the kind of parent who treats her kids' football stats like they're the center of the universe. She wasn't always like that. When I was little, she seemed normal, putting my school projects on the fridge, showing up to my science fairs, things like that. Then Mike came along, and it felt like I was erased from the family picture. It didn't matter that I put myself through college, never asked them for money, and built a career on my own. To my mom, the only stories worth telling began and ended with Mike and whatever game he played last weekend. My dad, 53, never yelled at me, but he never stood up to her either. He just stayed in the background while Mom hyped Mike up like he was already destined for the NFL. Grandpa Joe, my dad's dad, was the only one who ever called it out. He lives a few states away, about a 3-hour drive from my parents, but he called every week and never hid how wrong he thought things were. One Christmas, he even said it directly to my mom's face. She didn't speak to him for months afterward. One thing that still stings is the college fund my grandparents set up for me. After a small house fire during my junior year, my mom claimed it had been used as an emergency fund for repairs. Years later, I found out the truth. Most of it went toward Mike's first car and part of the down payment on his apartment when he started college. Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs just to afford my rent. People often ask why I didn't cut contact sooner. The truth is, I spent years trying to earn some kind of approval. I kept thinking that if I reached enough milestones, they'd finally show up for me. They never did. Grandpa Joe was the only one who ever made me feel proud of myself. When I graduated, he mailed me a handwritten letter saying he wished he could have been there, along with $100, saying he wished he could have been there along with $100, saying every man deserves a cold drink after walking the stage. That's just who he is. I met my wife Nora in college. We started as friends, both working at the same library desk. She learned about my family early because she saw it herself. During freshman year, my parents visited campus once, and only because Mike's team had an away game nearby. They didn't even call me. I found out through Facebook pictures. Nora's family is the complete opposite. Her parents show up for everything, even the small things. When she had a photography exhibit, her mom brought cookies for the entire class. Watching that felt strange to me at first. The story really begins last year, after something Mike posted online. But to understand why it hit so hard, you have to see the pattern. Mike has been good at football since middle school. No denying that. He earned a scholarship to a solid college. But the way my parents treated it, you'd think he was already in the Hall of Fame. My mom even has a room in their house filled with his jerseys, medals, and framed action shots. Meanwhile, I worked my way through school, built a career in tech, and slowly moved up. When I bought my first car with my own money, my mom just said, "Oh, that's nice," before immediately talking about how Mike's coach thought he might break a record that season. It was always like that. Once, my grandpa told me, "Stop trying to compete with your brother for their attention. Build your own life. One day, they'll realize what they missed." At the time, I thought he was just trying to comfort me. Turns out, he was right. Because about a year ago, Mike posted something on Instagram that set everything in motion. It was a short video of him at a party, music blasting, him holding a drink, laughing with his teammates. The caption read, "Some of us chase real goals. Some of us just sit behind desks, pretending to be important. Guess which one?" The kind of thing my mom brags about. Then a bunch of laughing emojis. Mom liked it. So did a few aunts. One cousin tagged me with an eye emoji. That was the first moment I felt something inside me. Crack, not anger exactly. Just a quiet realization like, okay, they've made the scoreboard clear. I didn't comment or text him. But that post set everything else in motion. The events that eventually made Mike, my parents, and half the extended family see me very differently. And it all started because they didn't even bother to ask what event I had invited them to. By the next morning, a few old classmates had tagged me under the post with laughing emojis. Some commented things like rough or dang, bro. Like they were watching a fight instead of my own family calling me irrelevant. My mom even commented, "So proud of you, champ," under Mike's post, which felt like rubbing salt in the wound. The post didn't go viral beyond our small circle, but it spread enough. People I hadn't spoken to in years saw it. I just replied, "Yeah," because I didn't feel like saying anything more. The truth is, this wasn't new behavior for Mike. He's always been like this. If he wasn't showing off some football stat, it was the car my mom bought him at 17, or the apartment they helped him get near campus. One Thanksgiving, he even told me I should aim higher than being average, like he was offering life advice while our parents nodded along. I didn't respond publicly, because honestly, what was I supposed to say? Actually, I have a good job? That just makes you sound defensive. So instead, I focused on work. At the time, I was leading a small product team at a mid-sized tech company. We'd been working on a tool for months, and around then, we secured a deal with a regional client. It meant a solid bonus for the team and a promotion for me. It wasn't flashy like sports, but it was respected in my field. I didn't post about it. I told Nora, and I told Grandpa Joe over the phone. He was happy for me. He said, "Keep stacking wins. People notice even if they act blind." That same week, Mike sent me a private message on Instagram. "You could have been something if you tried harder. Don't blame mom for backing a winner." No punctuation, like he was too busy being successful to bother typing properly. I stared at it for a minute, then just replied, "Cool," and left it at that. He sent back a laughing emoji. Nora saw the message later while we were watching TV. She asked if I was okay. I said yeah, because there wasn't much else to say. None of this was new. The next day, Grandpa Joe called after one of my cousins told him about the post. He was angry in that quiet way he gets, speaking slowly like he was holding himself back from yelling. He said, "Son, you don't have to clap back. Build your life. Let the scoreboard speak later." I told him about the promotion. He said he wished he lived closer so we could celebrate in person. Then he asked about Nora. How she was doing, whether the wedding plans were coming along. Because by then, Nora and I were already engaged. We'd kept it low-key, no big announcements. When we finally set a date, a Saturday in the fall at Nora's aunt's place, I texted my parents and Mike, "Hey, I've got an important event coming up this fall. Date's October 14th, would love for you to be there. It's locked in, can't move it." My mom replied, "That's Mike's last regular season game before playoffs. We'll be there supporting him." I didn't correct her or explain further. If they cared, they would have asked. They didn't correct her or explain further. If they cared, they would have asked. They didn't. Nora asked if I wanted to tell them it was the wedding. I said no. If they cared, they'd asked. After a couple of weeks, the Instagram post faded. People moved on. Mike kept posting game clips. My mom kept sharing them with captions like, "So proud of my boy." Grandpa Joe kept calling every Sunday, asking about work, about Nora, about life. He never mentioned the post again. Just said, "Tell me when the big day is. I'll be there in my best suit. Haven't worn it since your grandma's funeral." About time it saw some good news. I gave him the date. He wrote it down on the calendar he keeps by his fridge and said he wouldn't miss it for anything. Meanwhile, my parents never asked, not once. And that's how October 14th stayed marked on their calendar as Mike's game day instead of Sam's wedding day. To explain how the wedding day ended up the way it did, I should go back a bit to when I actually proposed to Nora. It was March last year. We took a short weekend trip to a cabin, about 2 hours outside the city. Nothing fancy. Just a quiet place with hiking trails and a lake. I'd been carrying the ring around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. I'm not good with big speeches, so I kept it simple. Saturday morning, we hiked up a trail that led to a lookout point over the water. It wasn't crowded that early. I took out the ring, managed to say something about wanting her with me through every chapter of my life, and that was it. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped it. She laughed, said yes, right away, and hugged me so tightly I nearly lost my balance. There was no audience, no cameras, just us, and a couple of birds somewhere in the trees. When we got back home, I called to say I'd proposed. Mom said, "Oh, that's nice," and immediately shifted to talking about Mike's off-season tournament. Dad muttered, "Congrats, son. That was the entire reaction. Nora didn't say anything at the time, but later she asked if that was normal. I told her yeah. For the next few months, every time we saw my parents, my mom talked about Mike's training schedule, his stats, his playoff chances. Not once did she ask about our plans. Then, sometime in the summer, I learned something else that sealed it for me. One of my cousins mentioned that my parents had paid for Mike's new sports agent in an advanced training camp out of state. Serious money. I asked how Mike could afford it, and my cousin said, "Oh, your parents helped. Didn't you know?" No, I didn't. Apparently, they used what little was left of that same emergency fund they had dipped into years earlier, the college fund that was supposed to help me with grad school before it ran out. I remember just sitting there, letting it sink in. At that point it wasn't even about the money anymore. It was the pattern. Everything for Mike. Scraps for me, if that. I didn't argue with him. I didn't ing it up at all. I just told Nora, we're not waiting for them to be excited about our wedding. We're doing it our way. We chose October 14th because it was the only fall weekend available at the place Nora's aunt owned. It was a large backyard with string lights, room for tables, a small dance floor, and a view of the hills behind it. Perfect for what we wanted. Simple. Private, nothing over the top. We invited around 60 people. Close friends. Some of Nora's family. Grandpa Joe, and a few cousins I actually kept in touch with. I told Grandpa Joe I wanted him to walk me down the aisle since my parents couldn't be bothered. He went quiet for a moment, then said he'd be honored. Meanwhile, my mom kept posting on Facebook about Mike's upcoming game, sharing highlight reels, talking about scouts possibly being there. Not a single mention of my event. My dad didn't say anything either. He stayed quiet like always. By September, everything for the wedding was set. Nora handled the decorations with her aunt. I took care of the guest list and food. My parents never checked in once. Mike sent me a single text in late September. "Hope your thing goes good." Mom said, "It's same day as my game." Bad timing. Low. I didn't respond. Looking back, that was the moment I stopped expecting anything from them at all. October 14th came quickly. Nora and I stayed at her aunt's place the night before so we wouldn't have to rush in the morning. She and her family had been incredible, helping with decorations, arranging chairs, setting up lights. By sunrise, the backyard looked perfect. It wasn't some massive ballroom wedding, but it felt right. String lights stretched across the yard, tables decorated with simple flowers, a rented arch for the ceremony, and a small DJ set up in the corner. The weather was cool and clear. Guests started arriving around noon. My college friends flew in. From 3 different states. 2 cousins I hadn't seen in years drove 6 hours to be there. People kept asking if my parents were coming. I told them no, they had other plans. No one pushed further at the time. Grandpa Joe arrived in his old dark suit, looking sharp. He walked straight over, hugged me, and handed me a small box. "Your grandma wanted this passed down," he said. Inside was her locket. She told me to give it to the one kid who showed up for others the way people showed up for him. I just nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. The ceremony started at 2. Grandpa Joe walked me to the arch while Nora's dad walked her. Our friend Amanda officiated. She has the kind of voice that makes everything sound official, even though she mostly reads poetry at open mics. We kept the vows short. Neither of us wanted to drag things out. When Amanda pronounced us married, everyone cheered. Someone set off one of those confetti tubes, and the DJ played a song Nora loved from college. We took photos right after. A professional photographer handled the main shots, but people took their own pictures too. My cousins wanted a big family photo, and that's when someone asked again where my parents were. I said Mike had a game, they couldn't make it. A couple of relatives exchanged looks, but didn't say anything. At one point, Grandpa Joe leaned over and said quietly, "They're going to regret this." Dinner was buffet style, barbecue, pasta, salad, nothing fancy but plenty of food. Nora's aunt knew a caterer who gave us a discount, and people went back for seconds. We paid for the wedding ourselves. No loans, no help from my parents. Just us and Nora's aunt giving us a break on the venue. While people were eating, one of my dad's sisters, Aunt Linda, took a few photos of the ceremony and posted them on Facebook. I didn't think much of it at the time. I wasn't on my phone. Anyway, we had planned to go completely offline once the night was over. After dinner, we had a small first dance, then opened the floor. Kids ran around playing tag near the fence. People laughed, shared stories, and stayed late. It felt like what a wedding is supposed to feel like, friends and family actually being present. Around 9 p.m. we wrapped things up. Guests started leaving in groups. My college friends offered to help clean, but Nora's aunt waved them off and said she'd take care of it in the morning. Grandpa Joe hugged us both and said, "I haven't danced in 20 years. I'll pay for it tomorrow," but it was worth it. We promised to call him after our trip. The plan was simple: we'd leave the next morning for a short honeymoon. No phones, no work, just a week to ourselves. We both wanted to completely disconnect. Before going to bed, I checked my phone once. There were already dozens of notifications from relatives reacting to Aunt Linda's post. A few cousins messaged me saying things like, "Your mom's comment section is going wild." I turned my phone face down and didn't open anything. It could wait until after the trip. The next morning, we packed the car, said goodbye to Nora's aunt, and drove off. It felt good to leave everything behind for a while. No calls, no texts, no drama for 7 straight days. Just us, some hiking trails, a couple of small towns we'd never visited, and quiet evenings. What I didn't know at the time was that while we were gone, that Facebook post was spreading through my parents' entire community. People they'd known for decades were sharing it, commenting on it, asking why they hadn't been at their own son's wedding. By the time we got back, everything had blown up. When Nora and I returned a week later, I turned my phone on for the first time since the wedding. It barely loaded before notifications started flooding in. Missed calls, texts, voicemails, Facebook tags, dozens of them. At first I thought something serious had happened, like an accident. But then I opened Messenger and saw a wall of messages about Aunt Linda's wedding post. She had uploaded around 10 pictures, us at the ceremony, Grandpa Joe giving a toast, the dance floor. Her caption read, "Beautiful day celebrating Sam and Nora." Some folks chose other priorities, but the rest of us had a wonderful time. That line, "Some folks chose other priorities," is what set everything off. People from our hometown started sharing it with comments like, "Wait, his parents didn't go. And didn't they miss his graduation too?" A few even tagged my mom directly, asking if it was true. By the time I started scrolling, it had spread through local groups, old neighbors, even people from our childhood church. It wasn't viral in the sense of millions of strangers seeing it, but within my parents' community, everyone knew. Under my aunt's photos, my mom commented, "He never told us it was a wedding." People immediately pointed out that she hadn't asked. That was the whole issue, laid out in a single thread. Meanwhile, my inbox was flooded with messages from my mom, shifting from anger to desperation. The first ones were full of rage. "How dare you humiliate us like this? Your aunt had no right to post that." And the best one, "You should have told us it was your wedding." As if she hadn't ignored my message for months. After a few hours, the tone changed. "Please call me. We need to talk." Then people wouldn't stop messaging me. "I can't sleep. This is tearing our family apart." Mike sent his own set of texts, full of his usual attitude. "Real classy move, bro. Then, you made mom look bad on purpose." He even added, "You're pathetic for hiding your wedding like that." Like I was somehow the villain. I didn't respond to any of it. The real impact came from Grandpa Joe. While we were away, he drove 3 hours to see my parents in person. He sat them down in their own living room and told my dad he was ashamed of him for letting all of this happen. My cousin who lives nearby said Grandpa didn't raise his voice, but what he said hit hard. He told my dad, "You've let that woman run this house into the ground, while your son learned to expect nothing from you." According to my cousin, my dad just sat there, pale, like something had been pulled out of him. After Grandpa left, my dad called me. I let it go to voicemail since we were still unpacking. He left a message saying he was sorry, that he felt sick about missing the wedding, that he knew he had failed as a father. He said he told my mom things were going to change or he was done. My dad has been quiet my whole life. Hearing that he finally stood his ground felt strange. My mom kept messaging though. After the angry texts came the guilt trips. She wrote things like, "I'm your mother. I deserve a chance to explain." Then, "You don't know how hard this has been on me." She even tried, "Your father is talking crazy, saying things he doesn't mean." By the end of the week, she was outright begging, "Please don't cut us off. Then, I'll do anything to make this right." While all of this was happening, Aunt Linda texted me saying, "I didn't think my post would cause this much drama. I just wanted to celebrate you guys." I told her it wasn't her fault. On top of that, other relatives started calling. A couple of my mom's sisters were angry with me for making her look bad. They said she was heartbroken, crying all day, embarrassed in front of her friends. I told them she embarrassed herself by skipping my wedding for a football game. My dad's side of the family mostly supported me. A few cousins even left comments under Linda's photos saying things like, "Sam deserved better," and "about time someone said it." Things escalated even more when Mike's big game, the one my parents chose over my wedding, went badly. His team lost, and he got benched in the second half after throwing 2 interceptions. They still made the playoffs on a tiebreaker, but were knocked out in the first round the following week. People online started making jokes about how he skipped his brother's wedding for that performance. Even some of his teammates commented laughing emojis under posts about it. Mike texted me again after that, furious. He said I had cursed the season with my drama. I didn't reply. By the end of the week, my dad texted again asking to meet in person. He said he wanted to talk man to man, without my mom there. I agreed, but only after telling Nora everything. She said she'd support whatever decision I made, but didn't want me letting them guilt me into anything. That's when I realized things were going to get messier, before they got clearer. My dad chose a diner 2 towns over. He said he didn't want anyone overhearing. When I got there, he was already sitting in a booth near the back, a cup of coffee in front of him. No food. He looked older than I remembered, like the past few weeks had aged him years. He didn't waste time. As soon as I sat down, he said, "I owe you an apology." I didn't respond, just waited. He stared at his coffee like he couldn't bring himself to look at me. "I should have been at your wedding. I should have been at your wedding. I should have been at a lot of things. Your graduations, your games, everything. I let your mother control everything, because I didn't want conflict. I thought keeping the peace meant being a good father. It didn't." It was the most direct I'd ever heard him speak. He said he'd told my mom that if she didn't start making things right with me, he was done. He'd spent the past week sleeping on the couch after Grandpa Joe's visit because he couldn't even look at her without thinking about what Grandpa said. He told me Grandpa had said he failed as both a son and a father. Then he said he wanted to start fixing things. Not just with words, but with real changes. He said he wanted to go to counseling, that he would pay back what had been taken from my college fund, even if it took years, and that he wouldn't let my mom's excuses dictate things anymore. He admitted he hadn't written every check, but he allowed it to happen. I told him I appreciated the apology, but this wasn't something that could be fixed with a few checks and therapy sessions. He nodded and said he understood. He said he was ready to prove it through actions. We sat there for a while in silence. When the waitress came over, he ordered pie for both of us, like that might somehow make things feel lighter. It didn't, but I ate it anyway. 2 days later, my mom texted asking to meet as well. This time with both of them. Nora came with me. I wasn't going to sit through that alone. We met at the same diner. Mom looked exhausted. Puffy eyes. Messy hair. Like she hadn't been sleeping. She started immediately. "You didn't tell us it was your wedding. If you had, we would have been there." I told her I had invited them to an event, and she didn't even ask what it was before deciding Mike's game was more important. She tried to call it a misunderstanding, said she assumed it wasn't a big deal because I didn't push. I said, "That's the problem. You never cared enough to ask." She broke down, loud, uncontrollable, sobbing into a napkin. The waitress kept glancing over. Mom said she thought she was supporting the child who needed it most. That Mike's career had a limited window, and she wanted to give him every opportunity. I told her she didn't support him. She obsessed over him. And forgot she had another child. I brought up the college fund, the graduations, the birthdays she missed, listed everything so she couldn't reduce it to just the wedding. She kept saying she was sorry. I told her sorry didn't undo years of choices. Dad mostly stayed quiet, except to say he had started counseling, and that she should go too. He said things were going to change, whether she wanted them to, or not. By the end of the meal I told them I wasn't cutting them off, but I also wasn't pretending everything was fine. If they wanted a relationship, it would take time and real effort. No more one-sided excuses. Mom nodded through tears. Dad just looked tired but said he understood. The next day, Mike texted, asking to meet one-on-one. We met at the park near my apartment. He showed up in his team hoodie, already looking annoyed. He said he was under pressure. From scouts, coaches, and that his whole season was falling apart. He said the wedding situation had blown up more than it should have. I told him it blew up because our parents spent years acting like I didn't exist while he rubbed it in. He said he never asked to be the favorite. I said, yeah, but you definitely enjoyed it. He didn't deny it, just kicked at the gravel and said, people hate me now because of this. I told him people didn't hate him. They hated what he represented. A family that put one kid on a pedestal and ignored the other. He asked if we were good. I said we weren't enemies, but we weren't brothers either. Not right now. He didn't have a response to that. When I got home, Grandpa Joe called to check in. I told him about the conversations. He said he was proud of me for staying level-headed and not getting pulled into more conflict. Stick to what you said and let time speak, he told me. 2 days later, my boss offered me a lead role on a new product line at work. More responsibility, better pay. I accepted. For the first time in weeks, it felt like something in my life was moving forward while they were stuck dealing with the mess they created. By winter, things had settled down, at least on my end. Nora and I moved into a bigger apartment, closer to work, and I stepped into the new role leading the product team. The increased pay meant we could finally start saving for a house instead of just talking about it. Dad kept his word about the money. Every month without fail, he sent a small transfer labeled college fund payback. Sometimes $20, sometimes $50. Sometimes $50. Not large amounts, but enough to show he meant what he said. He even added short notes like, month 1, or getting there. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about him finally following through. He also told me he had started counseling. Said it felt strange at first, but he was learning how to speak up instead of staying silent just to keep the peace. I didn't press him for details. Just told him I was glad he was doing it. According to Dad, Mom went with him to a couple of sessions. He said the counselor told her directly that she needed to stop living through Mike and actually face the damage she'd caused. I don't know if that really sank in. She texted me a few times afterward, apologizing again, but I didn't respond right away. When I finally did, I told her I wasn't interested in more apologies. I wanted to see real change. If she wanted a relationship, she needed to stop acting like nothing had happened and start proving things were different. She said she understood. I wasn't sure if she actually did, but at least the conversation shifted from her crying to what she was going to do moving forward. Mike mostly stayed quiet after our conversation at the park. He had a rough end to his season. First-round playoff exit. No scouts reaching out like he'd expected. He posted less online too, probably tired of people commenting about how he skipped my wedding and still lost the game. He texted once in December, saying people still saw him as the villain in the family. I told him that was because he'd acted like one for years. He said that wasn't fair. I told him fair would have been having parents who cared about more than his football stats. He didn't reply after that. On Christmas, Dad came to visit alone. He said Mom stayed home because she didn't want to make things awkward. He brought a small gift for Nora, a set of baking dishes she actually needed, and a framed photo from our wedding that he'd gotten from Aunt Linda. He said he wanted us to have it. It was the first time in years he'd given me something personal. We had lunch, talked about work, about Grandpa Joe planning to visit in the spring. Nothing heavy. When he left, he said he was proud of me. Simple words. But he'd never said them before. By February, Nora and I had started looking at houses online. Nothing serious yet, just exploring. My job was going well, she was getting more photography clients. And for the first time, life felt like it belonged to us, instead of being tied up in family drama. Grandpa Joe came to visit in March. We took him to a large park with hiking trails and a lake. He used a cane now, but still insisted on walking as far as he could. Said it felt good to breathe fresh air after winter. He told me he was proud of how I handled everything. Said most people either explode or cut everyone off completely, but I had set boundaries and stuck to them. That takes more strength than anger. We sat on a bench overlooking the water. He told me about a time when he was younger and finally stood up to his own father. Said it didn't fix everything overnight, but it changed how people treated him from that point on. On the drive back, I thought about how different everything felt. Not perfect, but calm. No constant drama, no endless messages demanding attention, no arguments about Mike, just my life moving forward. A week later, I posted a single photo from the wedding on my page. Nothing dramatic, just me, Nora, and Grandpa Joe, standing under the lights in the backyard. The caption read, "I'm good. Built my own life with people who show up." That was it. No hashtags, no long explanation. Comments turned off. After that, I put my phone away, Sat on the couch with Nora and Grandpa and watched the sun set through the window. For the first time in years, everything finally felt like it was where it belonged. YouTube just rolled out a new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, hit that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up and helps bring even more wild stories your way.